Hey class, we are quickly approaching the anniversary of one of the coolest moments in American Revolutionary history. That's December 16, 1773, the Boston Tea Party. As a matter of fact, this is a great time of year to visit Boston. The events unfolded in November, of course, culminating in December. And if you go in December, you can see a reenactment of the meeting at the Old South Meeting House that precipitated the Boston Tea Party, and probably get a feel for the passion and the excitement and the patriotism that was going on at that time. You know what was going on, of course. There were 3 ships harbored in Boston's harbor, and they were loaded with tea, and the British said that we had to pay customs on that tea within 20 days. And we didn't want to pay customs because customs are taxes, and taxes are for people who have representation in Parliament. We had no such representation. So we wanted them to take their ships back to where they came from and, of course, take the tea with them. The governor at that time, Hutchinson, said that was not going to happen. And so the leaders of Boston would meet to try to decide what their plan of action was going to be. At first, it was just a few men that met, men who were eligible to vote according to their rules at the time. They had property, they were of a certain age. But eventually, they got rid of the property restrictions and the age restrictions, and so they quickly outgrew Faneuil Hall because lots of men wanted to come to these meetings. Lots of men wanted to be able to vote on what was going to happen. And so you had men from all different social stratas coming together in Boston for these meetings. They were lawyers, and they were merchants, and they were farmers and apprentices and mechanics and merchants and all these different types of people. They would come together, and they had to meet at Old South because it was the only building big enough to accommodate thousands of men. I mean, they were coming from a 20-mile radius, and they were coming from outlying villages, and they just were busting at the seams in this building. 6,000 men. We know that it could accommodate that many because that's how many came to listen to Whitefield when he came into town during the Great Awakening at that same building. So 5,000 to 6,000 men came, and of course on December 16th they had this night of furious debate, and then it closed with Samuel Adams coming and saying, "We can do nothing more in this meeting for our country." It was like these signal words that said basically, "Let the Tea Party begin." Of course, you know the rest is history. The interesting thing about the events that occurred in Boston in the early 70s is that the generation right after the Revolution didn't really want to talk about it very much. They didn't want to be associated with a mob. All of their patriotism was always very virtuous, and they didn't want to remember the fact that they had hung people in effigy from the Liberty Tree, or that they had actually tarred and feathered someone, or destroyed the house of the governor and the customs official. Didn't want to talk about that. Things changed in time, and in the 1830s they ran across the last living probably survivor of the events in Boston. He was there at the Boston Massacre, and he was also at the Boston Tea Party. He was actually on the ship. His name was George Hughes, and when they discovered him, they were just amazed at his memory, and so they asked him lots of questions and tried to learn as much as they could. First-hand accounts of this man who had lived through it all. And one of the coolest things about his memory is he did remember one thing wrong. He said he remembered that he was standing shoulder to shoulder on the ship with John Hancock, and they were both digging into these chests, breaking them open so that they could get to the tea to throw it overboard. Of course, historians are all unanimous in saying that could not have happened because the leadership was still back at Old South. But in his mind, in his memory, that's the way it was. And you know what? Probably it just as well could have been that they were all together in this, and that it very well could have been that you were rubbing shoulders with Sam Adams, or that you're rubbing shoulders with John Adams, or of course with John Hancock, that you were all working together for a common cause. This was a quintessentially American moment, and so I want you guys to go to Boston. You can enjoy the Freedom Trail and go on all these different sites, but I want you to do your research ahead of time, and I really want you to understand what was going on in the Old South, and I want you to walk into that building and just picture it, just loaded with men. There are 30 men to a pew, if you can imagine that, all squinched together. and all the open available standing places, and they're hanging over the balconies, and of course they're all crowded around outside in the cold trying to listen. And this was the moment when we set the pace for the way we were going to be for the rest of our history, right? This was going to be a popular revolution, and we are the inheritors of this legacy where we have passionate political involvement and it's open to everybody. Go see it and get a feel for that excitement.